Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lore and Frame, and Jaw the Dragon. I just got done playing a little bit of Splatoon 3, and I really got to thinking that, wow, I never actually got around to talking about this game in any meaningful capacity. And what do I mean by meaningful capacity? Like, what did I notice about this game that nobody else seems to have picked up on? Like, maybe I've acknowledged this here or there in streams or in community posts or what have you, but I have gone back to this game, a year after launch, and not only did I have a great time with it, I really grew to appreciate it. I really grew to appreciate the changes, the new stages, the updates, the new modes, the events. All of a sudden, after, being somewhat critical of the game in the recent past, coming back to it sometime later, the game is better than ever. And it's not just my imagination. I'm not just making it up. I'm not just being superfluous or trying to make excuses for the game. The game is legit better now. And this kind of goes into what I was saying about Splatoon, and I suppose the same applies to Splatoon 3, and I imagine will apply to the franchise in the future, and something that will make game journalists and YouTubers seethe for years to come. You cannot apply a score to Splatoon on launch day. You cannot evaluate this game day one, because when you get right down to it, the way these games are designed, the way they're paced, the way they're updated, the way they keep putting out new releases, new DLC, new updates, on a regular basis, the way these games have been handled, it is apparent to me, and I suppose will be to apparent to other people in the future, that giving this Splatoon 3 a 7 out of 10 because, it's too much like Splatoon 2 is disingenuous, because these games are designed to be regularly updated with content, to keep you playing for hundreds of hours, right? It is not a coincidence that people have come back and put hundreds or thousands of hours into Splatoon 3 already, right? This game is just constantly coming out with new stuff, constantly. And as a result of this, your day one impressions of Splatoon 3 are not really relevant to those of us who have stuck with the game and continued playing it for a year after launch, right? Now that the game is significantly older, now that it's been continued so long, and mostly that I kept playing it, it is apparent to me, right, that the game constantly manages to innovate, constantly manages to evolve, constantly manages to remain entertaining. And as a result of this, not only is this one of the best shooter franchises of all time, it really does showcase the way it really does showcase the way Nintendo manages to handle these kind of updates better than the competition. When you compare Splatoon 3 to something like Overwatch 2, you get a game that's wildly different than what it was in 2015. As opposed to Overwatch, which is basically the same thing but worse. Splatoon 3 has done nothing but improve the game and continually adding new things, adding new features, new weapons, new stages. The strategy evolves between players. You just have this constant, never-ending flow of just gameplay. And to think that people like Darkside Phil will play this game for 5 hours, 10 hours, excuse me, never touch the single-player mode, barely play the Horde mode, dismiss it as just being a generic, knockoff of zombies, and then just call it a derivative, uninspired new entry in the IP. No, that isn't the case at all. This game is still very much relevant in 2023. And I think this is an indication of where things are going, in that you can't simply just do this thing that you traditionally did, where a Nintendo game comes out and people said that would try to tell you okay, I'm bored of it, what's next? That's not the case for Splatoon. That's not the case for Tears of the Kingdom. That's not the case for so many of these Switch games, because these games are so long, so expansive, and are constantly coming out with new things that it is very difficult to imagine that anyone is blowing through these games in a weekend or even a couple of weeks, right? The people right now who are trying to tell you that Tears of the Kingdom is old and has been forgotten are delusional, right? The people who tell you that Switch is on the way out is delusional. Like the people who think Splatoon 3 is over and done with are delusional because the DLC is going to breathe new life into this game in a way that I think is going to be unprecedented for this kind of shooter, right? We are going to see Splatoon over time accumulate an audience and become extremely popular in spite of the crying, the whining, and the complaining from the Pretendo community about alleged similarities between Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2. Splatoon 3 is very much a great video game. One of the best on Switch, right? Splatoon 2 I still prefer because of like the DLC, but it's very possible that Splatoon 3 might actually be able to top it once its DLC comes out, right? That is going to be an interesting experience. I really wonder just how much can people continue sleeping on this IP? Like it's selling a ton. People are really enjoying it. It's one of my favorite games on Switch, and yet still to this day, like you still see so many YouTubers try and say that there's something wrong with it or that like Nintendo dropped the ball. And it just really isn't the case at all. Like, if anything, I think Splatoon 3 is well on its way to becoming an extremely popular game.